Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited for today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. Having the desire to help, the courage to move, and the patience through the process. Guardian are and is responsible. Our guest today is a dear friend of the Culture Matters podcast, a mentor to our listeners as it relates to piety, among, of course, contracting in the context of roofing, the founder of Guardian Roofing and Siding. For those that don't know, Robert Frehafer and his guardians, they go into the storm. Other people are going out of the storm. They're going into the storm. I'd be going away from the storm. If you're listening to this, you may be going away. They're going into it, and they're helping people each and every day with needs that they may not be aware of in the slightest that are needs for them. And today we're going to talk about responsible, the R in Guardian. Thanks for coming back, Robert.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
You know, responsible. What comes to mind when you hear the word responsible? Like general responsible, the general.
Sure. Generally, it's I think it's a positive connotation of a character that you can count on. Somebody that, from a character standpoint, representing a person, someone, or even an organization that you could count on to be able to respond. That's really what comes to mind when you bring up the word responsible. Was at a young age being involved in a 12-step program at I don't know if it was 13 or I think it was probably 14 years old, having to start to read and then understand the words that I'm reading and take the word out of the context of the sentence or the paragraph or the chapter and look up responsible and getting it explained to me, like the ability to respond.
I didn't know you took dance classes at 12.
Did you say dance?
Yeah.
How do you mean? Oh, 12 steps. Got it. Yeah, no.
Good morning. For those that
Narcotics
don't know,
Anonymous program. What'd you say? I missed it. I was talking over you. What?
I just didn't know you took dance classes at 12.
That's great. Now it's more than two-step. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Well, for those that don't know what the 12 steps are, what is that?
Well, I wouldn't do it a justice to ramble all 12 off,
But
but
yeah, you don't need to tell us all.
generally speaking, that's like there's many anonymous programs, but Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the most popular 12-step programs. I think people know as well, Narcotics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous, things of this nature. And there's 12 steps of a generally admitting, that you have a problem, accepting help, sharing with one another, righting your wrongs, having a awareness, spiritual awakening, conscious contact with God. I'm kind of touching around on some of it, but ultimately it's a way to remove something of a vice, and my view, allow a space for God to come in and then to work and live as a productive member of, not all about working, but be a productive member of society.
You were there at 12?
No, I want to say 13 or 14.
We're
much older than 12, Jay.
Wow. What do you say to our listeners that maybe have a teen that they're leading right now, of how to be responsible with them, they're a parent of a teen that may be where you were once at 13 or 14?
Just so I understand, you're saying, what would I say to a parent that has a 13 or 14-year-old that may be in a similar scenario
Mm.
that I was.
Yeah.
Because right when you first asked the question, I was thinking, well, it might not the perspective that I would offer may not apply to many 13 or 14-year-olds that aren't in the same case that I was. But in an effort to, just educate yourself as the parent, first and foremost, go out, learn. There are 12-step programs for parents. And I don't know, I forget what they're called. Oh, Naranon or Al-Anon. These are 12-step programs that are made. They're free. You can join. You can get support from other parents that are struggling, learn how to integrate and deal with and healthy behaviors. A lot of times what's happens is parents, they almost support the poor behavior of the children. And now this is really going to dig into culture of what you and I talk about in business, right? As the leader, if I'm allowing, there's a word for it that's not coming to my mind, but if I'm allowing poor behavior to go on in the business and I don't do anything about it and I make excuses for them for the bad behaviors that go on, or fear of losing them, so then I have my own selfish desires of why I would keep them or not correct them. I know that might sound harsh from a parent to a 13 or 14-year-old, but my plead would be, do it now. Do it while you still have an opportunity. Love, it's, tough love, I believe, was a phrase that was coined through those type of programs where you wouldn't continue to encourage that type of behavior. You would make things harder for your child, your spouse, your family member. So education, counseling, these are hard things, and to navigate. And my worldview is, and this is coming from the way that I believe it, when I have a true self-reflection that I am, is that I don't want to like push my kids away. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want them not to like me, right? That's my own issues that I need to navigate. And it's fearful that if I push them away, if I was to push my own children away through an effort of correction to a poor behavior that's actually going to be self-harming to them on whatever capacity, whether it's drugs or just staying up late watching video games or playing video games instead of getting to sleep. The concern is that the relationship will break, which it's a paradox. You're actually, by correcting them, you're building more of a relationship. And it's uncomfortable. So that being said, educate yourself is what I'd recommend. Go out there and go to counseling yourself, see what part you play, love your child, and don't give up. Don't give up on them. And more than likely, if the child is into things that I was into, they're hurting, right? They're lost. They just, and they're finding something that in that timing too, even at 14, 13 years old, when you're using drugs and alcohol, it doesn't seem that bad. It's exciting. It feels good. So, I guess to give a parent some context that might not have any history in drugs and alcohol, life is uncomfortable for some people. Me, I'm pointing at myself for the listeners not here. It's uncomfortable, and finding a drug or an alcohol that relieves that, it's like finding a buried treasure, so to speak, although it comes with all kinds of curses and challenges, and it's secretive and you have to keep it away and it's illegal and there's all this guilt and shame. Like, so love your child. I'm talking about 13 or 14-year-old. That's a baby to me these days. I can't even imagine. So I could go on for the rest of this podcast and talk about what I would advise parents to do. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, we'll unpack that through this series. Having the desire to help, courage to move, and the patience through the process. Why does a guardian need to be responsible?
So great, right? Like even as you say the words, the double entendre, right? The guardian is the parent in the story that we're just talking about. The guardian is the leader in what we do, and the guardian is also the sales representative that's going out into the house and dealing with the homeowner in a retail in a residential standpoint. So, and the answer, which is beautiful about values, it applies in all of these situations, these relationships. So, we talk about as a leader for myself in a company, to the sales reps, the desire to help. I have experience. I've been doing this for a while. I have more experience being a guardian than anyone else in the company because I've founded it. Right now, that being said, other people can come in that might be doing this longer than me. So the desire to help. I have a desire to help the people, that the staff that come in based off of what I see. I I need to enact that desire. Desire is like a thought, a feeling, an emotion through courage, um, to move, right? Like there's whether that's a word, whether that's sharing something, whether that's demonstrating something, there's risk involved. We talked about the parent as the guardian. They have a desire to help their 13, 14-year-old child. Well, they have to have the courage to move, because that fear that rises in of are they going to like me? Are they going to be upset with me? Am I going to push them further into drugs and alcohol because I'm damaging the relationship? That same thing can apply to the salesperson, the guardian that's out in the field. They have to have the desire to help. If a guardian doesn't have a desire to get up every day, go out, introduce themselves to people, do all the that's in a brand new client relationship context, right? To go out and continue to fill the sales funnel of relationships, to open up your relationships. If you don't have that desire to help the client, because it's a hard ask. A lot of times it's either most people aren't aware that they had storm damage, or they're so aware because there's 100 people knocking on their door every single day. They're getting postcards in the mail. They're getting telemarketing to their houses. All their friends are talking about it. So, but from the consumers, from the client's standpoint, they don't even know what side is up. If you Google hail damage, roofing, storm chaser, it's probably 50% are these terrible things of, look out, don't get hurt by these poor, bad actors in the industry, and what is roof damage, what is storm damage, and what isn't storm damage. So they're very confused. So the guardian, the sales rep, has to have this desire to go out and meet with somebody to help them understand that it doesn't have to be that way, as well as someone that they're not even aware they have damage because you can't see it from the ground, to go out and be told, no, my roof looks fine. Well, and the courage to move, that's the move, right? The talking to them, the letting them know the truth of what it is. It goes back to the G, right? To the G value of listening intentional, educating, educating the customer by telling the truth. So all these things come they culminate into action, and such a very, it's all so important. But the next part is the patience through the process. Because if I know something, my experience tells me, if I know something, or I believe that I know something, which is in the best interest of all parties, and I am not making myself clear to my counterpart, they're in a disagreement with me, they have a different view. If I'm not patient from step one, I'll lose the relationship. They will close down, or let me not push this on someone else. What I've seen is that they'll close down. I won't have the opportunity, through my lack of patience, to even get a chance to demonstrate or share with them the truths that I know. I won't get a chance to listen intentionally to what they're saying. And there's a high probability that I won't even be able to help. So my desire gets stifled, my desire to help somebody solve a problem doesn't even get a chance to be enacted because of the lack of patience, which will then come out through my word, action, or inaction. If I'm not feeling it, yep, I walk away from the door when I knock on someone's door. If I go into an appointment with somebody for the first time and they're like, yeah, I just want an estimate. I know what's going on here. I just don't have a lot of time for this, or I'm going to go to the insurance company, see what they say first. If I respond and say, well, yeah, good luck with that. Let me know how you make out. When you really need my help, tell me. I could never see myself saying that. I could picture it, but I could never in reality. My ability to respond to that statement will come out though. If I'm feeling it and thinking it, and I'm not experiencing patience to listen and ask questions, I will demonstrate it unbeknownst to me, and I'll get the receipt back from the client of what that is. So truly embodying this virtue and value of patience will, at the door, in a meeting, with a client, with an adjuster that we're meeting. Now, these are in all sales contexts, but I have the same thing to hold on to with advisors, with leaders in the company, with other business, other people that are in business with me that I have to deal with, or vendors, like so many areas of life. This applies, right? This applies to the parent and the 13-year-old, because if the parent knows, like, duh, you could go to jail, you could end up taking a bad pill that has fentanyl in it, you can die, and they have this desire to help, right? They have the courage to move. But if they don't have the patience through the process, it really may stifle. I'll land on the word patience a little bit. It is not something that is a strong suit for me. It has been a practice, and it's been a gift to be able to have patience. But I also don't see it much in our society. Just, and it's interesting because I have a view of patience. I have a biblical worldview of patience. I look at it as a fruit of the Spirit. It's a gift when a believer puts their faith in Jesus Christ, and they have the Holy Spirit of God that enters them. And when we do the exercises, when I do the exercises of reading, praying, repenting, and doing, there's so many different things that are laid out. It's a gift from God that I get to experience. It's called a fruit of the Spirit. So peace, patience, joy, kindness, self-control. So I have a high level, like a high respect for the word of patience, but I think it's a very worldly word that, and I'm looking at the definitions right now. The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. That's pretty strong context for that word. So, and it is, we talk about the parent of the 13 or 14-year-old, the capacity to accept or tolerate delay in that change, right? As the founder of a company or leader that's trying to help, change a culture of a company, to be able to tolerate and accept that delay or suffering without getting angry or upset. Focusing on that word upset is important, because, angry is like, oh, that's ugly. But the upsetness inside, and to enjoy peace while the change goes on, that's a value that I could not put a dollar amount on what that life's change has been about. And I really, Jay, I can't help myself but give you a lot of credit for helping me navigate my daily life in that I get to experience a lot more of this, I believe, patience, because of a lot of the behavioral and awarenesses that you've given me. Although in the short term, it's very uncomfortable to endure some of these things and stare them in the face rather than, ignore them, allow the poor behaviors, not stand up for myself, me enact similar poor behaviors in this, codependent negative relationship with those around me. And even as time goes on, it makes even maybe more uncomfortable situations arise that I get upset through, and then the practice of handling bigger, more important topics that will have then what's proven through the last 4 or 5 years, larger payoffs, benefits, gains from dealing with the harder problems, bigger payoffs internally for my own, life's experience, as well as interacting with those around me, being a better leader. It's something that, so I really appreciate the meeting this morning and this Zoom or this podcast to record these things, because it's just like with every one of these other values, it sharpens and it gives me more clear definition. Like, man, this is how we live this. The continual talk about it. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yeah. Do you see value in discussing and rediscussing the values, even with your team, and even through this medium with our audience here? And if so, why do you think that's valuable?
So this is a reoccurring question that's coming up in each of these value podcasts, and I
Good
will
memory.
you hit me in the feels each time, because I'm going to say again, I have not been enacting this over. I've had these values for years now, written. I lived them. They've been created. That you were very helpful with in observing them and putting word to them, and then they've been out there. They've been pulled from and discussed in I believe, a small amount of time. They've been, through over the years, only a little bit of usefulness have I practiced that. So this is another reminder for me, just that. So there hasn't been a lot of talk within the organization about it. There's been living it. There's been some pointing back to it when things come up, but there has not been a lot of intentional talk. Like, let's talk about this value and how this works in our daily lives, how this works in context of our vocation. But these podcasts have been very helpful for me, because I do believe that the practice of even verbalizing it and applying it through the word and situational things that are, theoretical, has been helpful for me. So I would assume that, and I would like to practice doing that with others, will be impactful for them as well, that they would understand them and it would be deeper ingrained in them. And
Well, I want to acknowledge you. I would argue that the proper order of things would be the ownership, acting them out, having become aware of them, identify with them, and live them, impacting the culture in a constructive way. And then to really start talking about them. And the reason is because I've observed values being created and codified, curated in almost every organization I've been around, that where the order was the opposite. There was all talk about them. And the talk tended on tribalistic talk. You're not living this, you're not living that. Because the leadership of the organization had yet to actually start living them themselves. So I think you're right on track. You're a very strong example of the process of becoming aware of what a company stands for from a value standpoint, acting them out top down, and then presenting them to the people when it makes sense to do so. Because in the opposite order, I've watched values just become weapons and shields and not solve anything, but be another liability on the balance sheet of, So That would be the order, I would argue, is for the leadership. And once that is a constant, now it's time to bring them to the people and have conversation, and for them to come up and come about in conversation when relevant. Right? Like whenever I'm in the office, I always ask what value would represent this, or how, look for some way to ask a question or make an observation around the G, the G, the U, the A, the R, the D, the I, the A, the N. What rises up in that explanation?
Well, the most recent thing. You're asking me that? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. I want to make
Just
sure
when you were
I
going
was
to the
clear
G, to
enough.
the U, to the A, I was thinking you were going to bust into a rap song, maybe.
Ah, ah,
But no, in all seriousness,
we
when you
could make a rap
said
song.
when you explained about how like some companies will write the values, talk the values, and then it'll be used in a sword and shield capacity. We talked about that in our last, a little bit, not so much from that utilization of the values, but more of how people will look at values. The culture, my view is that the culture looks at values as a bunch of bullcrap, corporate mumbo jumbo to try to brainwash you into being who they want you to be, and
Yes,
that's
and that is all true.
a symptom of the same. That's in alignment with what you're saying can go on. So number one, that rises up. We discussed that. I think it was in our last podcast. So someone can circle back and listen to that. Two, we talked. The other thing that rises up is that thank you for sharing with me. Like, hey, I think you're doing it in the right order, and I will accept that from you, but with a caveat that in an effort to potentially explain a little deeper, is that my level of awareness of what speaking about the values brings has risen, especially since have been doing this podcast series. But even prior to that, there's a time that I've become aware that, okay, talking about these values has proven valuable, no pun intended. And although I've started the practice minimally, I do believe that there could have been more done in that timing. But now that I'm aware of it, I know that there's more that could be done in this. Even if you say this last 2-month time period, that it's a nice reminder for me. It's a self-correction.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way for a sec. The person in a position of ultimate power, it's inherent that they're the leader because they are ultimately in control of yes or no of the organization. So their actions dictate the influence, even more so than the words. So when the followers observe behavior, they're going to be aligned to the organization or misaligned. So the followers have been observing your behavior, the person of ultimate control. And that's created a constructive influence and alignment. Now, for those followers, for the percentage of leaders to rise up, to naturally rise up in those followers, the doing and the speaking of the ultimate leader, the person in ultimate control of the organization, because they are the ownership. They have to combine that doing and the speaking, so that a percentage of those followers that have been observing, that are constructively aligned in tow with how to behave, they're acting that out now as well. They're going to speak because they can't speak of what they don't know about. They can only alter their behavior based on observation of what they've seen of someone they that is in power, that's above them, and that they also are want to honor, and they respect, and they believe it as their maker, in a sense, in an economic sense, right? Their maker. They provide resources to them and their family. They provide meaning to them and their family based on how they labor. So it's like that leader, follower, a percentage of the followers to become leaders. They're not just observing and doing. They now have to have the constitution, like the framework of speech to talk about the values that they're acting out, and they're acting them out at a higher likelihood because they've been observing their leader, the leadership act these values out. They now have to act and talk them out, and that then they will rise up as leaders. Those in more with more level of control, let's say a higher degree of accountability. It's the actions and the speech meeting. When the speech comes before the actions, when a facilitator, professionals bringing in values to an organization, if the speech comes before the actions and the instantiation of those actions in behavior of the ownership, then the process undermines itself. It creates a further separation between the ownership and its people, because the ownership is using values as a form of control to get the people to change without themselves becoming more responsible based on their degree of power. They're trying to change their people before leveling themselves up in their learned behavior. And that is a sign of dictatorship, autocracy. It's ultimately the antithesis of leadership and management. So this is something I've observed as a constant with companies that are searching for help and getting, I would say, just let's say inadequate help in these regards from those that have dedicated their lives to helping, that likely really care deeply about what they're doing. It just may not be in the proper order. And so I want to acknowledge I believe you're exactly on the path and a steward of this example of how to go about bringing values into organization. It's the ownership starting with themselves and how they behave, and coming to a point where now they, with conscience, can discuss the things that they've been doing and bring their people in to make sure that to help them with where they're weak, where they're blind, so that they can continue to earn their leadership as opposed to just force their leadership. But it's that doing and speaking combination that once that starts happening from the top, doing first, then speaking, and then doing and speaking incongruent, the company can explode in leadership, because the followers that have observed that behavior and that are living those values and are operating at a higher level of productivity, a percentage of them are management worthy. Like, they'll raise their hand. Now they know what to say and how to think about things, and that'll attract tons of more people to the organization. So I think I'm excited.
As you should be. Thank you again. I really appreciate you taking some time and sharing your view. And I'm hopeful that the listener as well can grab onto that. One question I have just before we break off, very simple. Instantiation. I think you used that word as we just went through there. Do you, like, I think it was like in a context of to substantiate something, like to prove it. Do you remember saying it?
Represent as or by an instance, a study of two groups who seem to instantiate productive aspects of this.
I just wanted to make sure that was the word, because I wanted to look it up. Instantiate.
Yeah. To live out, or to integrate between the abstract and the real. We're going from concepts to,
so in other words, like
behavior
matters, because it's an abstract mindset and it's brought
that's a great
to real, like similar. It's an esoteric, which is brought into this this
Yeah, I
business
like that
realm.
example, like in the sense that um, for the idea that culture matters, to go from concept to bearing the fruit of that concept is, I think this conversation is in tow with that. That the ultimate um, ownership, acting the value, their values, the highest degree possible, is going to increase the likelihood that customers and potential talent will want to work with and for the organization, and do more, to be more, and as human beings. And that, thinking about the topic of people and how people work, has a relevant is relevant. It matters because it has an impact on the top and the bottom line. This will be an example of, yeah, so that's to represent an abstraction by concrete instance.
Yeah, it's a good word. It's like an instant. It's coming. I believe it's coming from the root word instant, like instantiation, and it's just a new word
So
for me.
whenever you clarify or explain a concept with a real world example, so a real world example, what would be an example of how Guardian, how the to this conversation around values today,
Yeah.
What's an example of how the values have had a actual impact on the company through you?
Well, again, I go back to it's a larger response, but I go back to the fact that these values are written based off of the examples that were lived out. So the impact of these values on the company is the time in business, right? Over 15 years in business. So almost, or over $50 million of roofs completed, thousands of clients that have been served and are satisfied, right? That have been helped through, through this process. The people that have worked within the company, the staff, their impact on their lives, the impact on my life changing. So some of those they're larger, but that is my view, and I'm the leader of the entire company. So, I think it's reasonable to look at it from that view, from a larger medium, or a higher instant. The instances that arise to me are big picture things over time that have been impacted by these values. Now, where could we be 15 years in if these were enacted more clearly, sooner, and communicated clearly? That's always, my mind always goes to improvement generally, right? But we are where we are today.
What's an example of you living the R, acting out the R in the last month?
Bear with me one second.
Like the responsible.
Yeah.
In closing.
Well, I appreciate that. And so this last month has been full of the R for me. I have been so entrenched into the operations, we'll say, the nitty gritty of what goes on a daily basis within the company. I've been focusing there, so I have this desire to help. It has been very hard to do. So the courage to go in and make these changes, work with everybody, share my vision, listen to other people, that's really hard for me. I know it might not sound or seem like that based off of my personality, but it's conflict. Change is conflict. It's continual conflict, and it's a need to understand everybody else's perspective, how any little change will affect the rest of the industry, the rest of the business. and then the patience through the process. It is really hard when I see something a certain way and I think it should be that way, to be patient as I navigate, my vision, sharing my vision, listening to my counterparts, feedback, and then initiating a change, having that courage. Circles back to the courage to move through and initiate it. So in an inner workings of the operations of, I can just break one down: onboarding and offboarding of staff. Right, that's a big deal. How does this go? And I'm coming in from the assumption that the onboarding of a staff member can make or break their experience with the company, just like any client. If a client was to come to us and their first experiences were late, we weren't prepared, we're doing stuff in the meeting, we're buttoning up our shirt while we're sitting at the kitchen table, that's not preparation. That's not how I want to see it. So I want to see onboarding. We know, the first 90 days, day by day, of what's going on. We have better checks and balances to know, is the new staff member learning the content, or have we just given it to them? I'm trying to take it to another level of responsibility on Guardian's side, on the company side, to make sure that they have learned. And if they haven't learned, be able to let them go. So we can spend the time, energy, and resources on somebody that is able to retain and has the values and can demonstrate them. So yeah, that's a real life scenario. And thank you so much, Jay, for the time. I know we're running.
Well, now we instantiate it, because the millionaire that drives a Lamborghini, that would be an example of instantiation. And you, my friend, have just knocked that out of the park. Not the Lamborghini, just because, but explaining with an example. Thank you for coming on, and I'm excited to learn about the I.
Well, the D is next.